What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and in this video we're going to be breaking down the big experimental mode changes specifically targeted to dynamically change this barrier heavy meta right now, and it includes Roadhog and Zen buffs, brig nerfs, and much more. So make sure you watch it to the end so that you get the entire picture for what the new meta is going to be in Overwatch. But before we get started, GameLeap.com is the best place that you can go to if you want up-to-date in-depth VODs. You see, right now, finding Overwatch content about your specific hero is going to be very difficult. Whether you're a Ryan player, or Lucio player, or whatever, finding in-depth guides about your hero is basically impossible anywhere else besides the GameLeap website. So do yourself a favor, go check it out. I'm sure that you will find everything you're looking for, so I'll see you there. Now let's talk about these crazy changes, kicking it off with your favorite character, Brigitte. Now, Brigitte first got a base health reduction from 200 to 150, which is very significant. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Then her Inspire mechanic, which was triggered by her regular fire or her whip shot, was decreased totally from 130 to 90, which reduced it from 21 per second to 15 per second. But her self-heal is no longer reduced in half. Now, what this means is that Inspire will heal her team far less, and her ultimate charge is going to take a big hit from this. This also means that the total effective HP of a team is going to be a lot less. That was a big conversation that people have been having at the higher levels, that Inspire created more effective health, which meant that burst damage was more needed because the overall hero pool was constantly being healed up. This kind of fixes that to some regard, which I'm excited about, but it's always a give and take, and the take is that the self-healing, instead of only healing 11.5 per second, now it's going to be healing at 15 per second, which is pretty substantial to have a little bit more self-healing. This is going to make Brig have a little bit more sustain herself, but of course the problem with Brig is the fact that she helped her team a little bit more, so it's going to fix it in that regard. Now we got to revisit the fact that her HP is lower, which is a very big deal, especially with her pretty weak barrier that got a nerf a while back. Brig is going to be able to be punished by burst damage a lot easier. Characters like Tracer, characters like Genji, Doomfist, these characters can harass Brig a lot easier, and Brig is not going to be able to be as frontliney as she was before. She's going to have to play a far more peely style of Brig, which, while I do think is powerful, is going to fundamentally change her pick rate and play style. I do think that this is an overwhelmingly huge change for Brig, and I don't really think that we're going to see her as much at the higher ranks, and she's going to be a lot less powerful in your ranked games. Now moving on to the next character on the list, we got Arisa, who got some pretty big nerfs as well. Her base armor got reduced from 250 to 200, which is just a straight up nerf to her health total, just like with Brig. It doesn't matter as much on Arisa as it does on Brig because of a bigger effective health pool, but it's still going to make her a little bit easier to punish. Now with Halt, the radius was reduced from 7 to 4 meters, which is a giant change. Like, that is huge. Halt is one of her most powerful abilities, and 4 meters, a reduction of 3 meters, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get Halt exactly where you want to and to hit everyone inside. As opposed to before, if Orion was pushing onto you with his whole team, you could throw it center mass and get like everybody, like 5 people in the Halt. Now you're going to have to really target it and pick and choose. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get as much value. But in order to compensate that, we talked about the give or take. The projectile speed was increased from 20 to 30, which means that it can be used to snipe enemies a lot quicker because of that increased speed, but it's going to take more precision. So essentially what this does is increases the skill cap on the ability, probably makes it weaker overall, but it still is powerful in the right hands if you really learn how to aim it exactly what you want to. Then we go to the next character on the list. We have Pharah, and her hover jets, the movement speed was increased from 20%, but the regeneration rate was reduced from 50 to 35 per second. Now, all in all, the regeneration rate reduction is probably just to match the movement speed increased, but essentially Pharah could just move faster in the air and get to the positions that you want to a little bit quicker. Yes, the increased movement speed will burn more of her fuel, but she also can go upwards or vertical faster, so it pretty much balances itself out. It's just that she can do things a little bit quicker, which is of course great for Pharah because she's all about transitioning from one natural cover into the next. Now the next thing is a Barrage Change. It got reduced from 3 to 2.5 seconds, which is actually a buff, not a nerf. I mean, you do not need a whole 3 seconds of her ultimate, and I honestly felt like you would activate her ultimate, you would get like 3 kills and then die at the tail end of your ultimate every single time. And this basically just lets you still do that initial burst of damage, but get it a little bit sooner. So it's honestly a buff. Now, what do I think about buffing Pharah in general? I do think that if they're going to make these buffs go to console, they should really think twice about it. Pharah is already dominant on console Overwatch, and I do know that you console players often have problems with Pharah, so I really do hope that they are a little wary and maybe balance Pharah different for console. Definitely let me know your opinion in the comments down below. Now, the next chance we got to talk about is Roadhog, who got pretty big buffs. Now, right off the bat, his ammo got reduced from 6 to 5, and his recovery time got increased from 0.7 to 0.85, which means he has less ammo and it takes him longer in between fires. Now, this might seem like, what the heck, that's a huge nerf, but they compensated this way over with the give and take thing we've already talked about by giving him 7 damage per projectile instead of 6. And remember, the scrap gun fires a whole bunch of projectiles, so this basically greatly increases his damage output. He was already at the cusp of being able to kill a lot of characters like Doomfist and Reaper if you got it perfectly, but what this allows you to do is just be much more consistent with one-shotting enemies. It also means that you can pressure tanks when you hook them a lot more. It really plays into what I like about Roadhog, not as a frontline brawler, but more as a pick-oriented hero that can really convert hooks into kills. The worst feeling in the world is hooking something and not being able to kill it, or that thing getting out at very low HP like a Reaper or a Doomfist, and that's going to happen a lot less with this change. So Roadhog is actually going to be a threat, and I do think, especially with double shield being nerfed, we're going to talk about the biggest double shield nerf in a second, I do think that Roadhog might see a substantial amount of play going forward, and your average Roadhog that ends your games is going to have more impact, so at least you got that going for you, which is nice. Now, the next character on the list is Sigma, and his experimental barrier, its health got reduced from 900 to 700, and the regeneration rate was reduced from 120 to 80 per second. Now, on top of that, his kinetic grasp got increased from 10 to 12 seconds. Sigma really got brutalized here, if I'm being honest. He is so much weaker than he was before with his reduction to all of his abilities. These are just overwhelming nerfs. Now, do I think Sigma's good enough to be played still? Sure, he is very good. I think he could still see play with a Rhine, maybe even in double shield, but they really wanted to hurt him at being that effective secondary shield. And because of the large regeneration rate, it's going to be a lot harder for you to have a permanent shield up with double shield Arisa Sigma. So more than likely, Sigma's shield is going to be used more to block off DPS and prevent certain specific abilities, not just being used on the front line to guard from all the spam damage of an enemy. And because of those reasons, I do think that Sigma's going to be a lot worse on average in nerf games, especially at the not highest level, because Sigma is a very difficult character to use, especially when we're talking about walling off those abilities and using his abilities very specifically instead of just generally on the front line. Now, moving on to the next character, got a big buff to Symmetra. Her photon projector, her primary fire, the delay before losing charge was increased from 2 to 4 seconds, which means if you go out of your way to build up charge on a barrier, like a monkey barrier, Arisa barrier, Sigma barrier, or you just built up your barrier just through fighting enemies, you're going to be able to take that charge a little bit more into the mid-fight, and that is just a nice buff. It's not going to change things too much for Symmetra, but once she gets going, she's going to stay going until the fight's pretty much over, so that is nice. And then the teleporter, the cooldown got reduced from 12 to 10 seconds. Not a gigantic change, but it is nice. It's a nice quality of life change. I don't think that this makes Symmetra like meta or anything like that, but it is nice to have these nice changes to Symmetra, who hasn't really seen that much pick rate and is kind of underpowered. Now, the last change that we got to talk about is your favorite character, Zenyatta, and his Orb of Destruction, which is his secondary fire. The charge rate got increased, which is going to be a nerf, but the rate of fire got increased from 8.5 to 9 seconds. Now, what this means is, yes, it's going to take you more time to charge up this attack, but the bullets themselves or the projectiles themselves are going to be much closer together, which means it's going to be more burst damage. It's going to give less time for enemies to like get hit and dodge. It's going to be like hit, 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 and it's going to be very rapid, which I do like about Zenyatta. It's going to make it so you can snipe a lot better with him, but if I'm being honest, this is not really the change we needed on Zen. Zen's been very fragile, and I do think that Zen either needed some more survivability or they needed to up his DPS in a meaningful way to protect protect him from flankers. Like, I would have liked to see maybe more Discord power or more primary fire power or whatever, so when a Doomfist dives him or something, he has some more survivability. If they really wanted to play into that glass cannon nature of Zenyatta, they could have done that, because this lets him snipe more, sure, but it doesn't really fundamentally fix his problem. So unless the meta dramatically changes, I still don't think that Zen is going to be very powerful with this change. Now, all in all, we got to talk about the meta after this. What characters are going to be good? What characters are going to be bad? What tanks are going to be played? Well, more than likely, I do think that this really hurts Sigma and Arisa, and I don't know if we're going to be seeing them as much. I do think that Roadhog is very powerful, but Ryan and Roadhog don't necessarily synergize that well together. This makes me believe that Ryan Zarya might actually see the play that it deserves, and that is great to say the least, especially on a map like King's Row. There's no reason that we should be spamming double shield and not Ryan Zarya. So I do hope that we see some more Ryan Zarya. We see some Ryan Zarya punishing some main tanks, and that'd be great to see because both Ryan and Zarya are both incredibly fun to play. Now, I also do know that when Ryan Zarya gets better, ball gets substantially better, and it's going to be a lot harder to stop a ball with the CC of Pool. So I could also see Hammond becoming a lot more played, and it's pretty good against Ryan Zarya as well. So those are the tanks that make the most sense to me. Now, as far as the meta per DPS and supports, I still do think that Anna's going to see a lot of play, but instead of the Brig, we could see a lot more Lucio, especially with that Ryan Zarya coming back. So for you Lucio players, dust off the old amp it up and start killing widows in the enemy's backline. Lastly, for the DPS, this one's the hardest to predict and the most dependent on what rank you're going to be at and what skill level you're going to be at. I mean, of course, widow's going to see tons of play up in GM+, but for the vast majority of players, I wouldn't be surprised if it's basically McCree as a surefire pick and then some combination of a lot of different characters that could be viable. Like Doomfist, Reaper, Genji, Echo, even Pharah might see some more play now. We're going to have to wait and see on that one, but definitely let me know in the comments down below what you think these changes dramatically do to what DPS characters are going to be played, and what changes would you like to see in the next patch. Definitely let me know, and I'm curious to hear your input. Anyways, if you want to master any of these characters or any of the new characters that are going to be good in the new meta, definitely go check out GameLeap.com for all in-depth VOD reviews, advanced tips and tricks. We got it for you at the GameLeap website, so I hope you enjoy it there. Anyways, that's all we got for you today. Thanks for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time,